He didn't just break my leg that day, he broke something far deeper. When my own son looked me in the eye, kicked me in the shin hard enough to shatter bone, and walked away without a trace of remorse, I realized that the real pain wasn't physical. It was watching the boy I'd raised with love, sacrifice, and every ounce of my soul turn into someone who saw me as nothing more than a wallet and a stepping stone. I used to believe that family meant unconditional trust, that no matter what life threw at us, blood would keep us bound. But betrayal, I've learned, doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from across the dinner table, wearing your last name and your hopes for the future. That was the day everything changed, the day I decided love alone wasn't enough, and that sometimes cutting someone off isn't cruelty, it's survival. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I wake up before the sun the same way I have for 30 years. The mornings in Flagstaff carry a crisp chill, the kind that sneaks under your collar and reminds you you're alive. Coffee brews slow and steady while the smell of pine drifts in through the cracked kitchen window. I listen to the percolator hiss, the same rhythm that's marked every day since my wife Laura passed 10 years ago. Back then, I promised myself two things: keep the business alive and raise Dylan into a man who'd never have to go without. By 6, I'm in my shop, the heart of this property. Sawdust floats in the shafts of light coming through the big front window. The air smells of resin and metal, of effort and time. I run my hands along the workbench, its surface scarred but familiar. Each groove is a story, every dent a lesson. I built this place from the ground up after the accident that took Laura. She always said wood remembers the hands that shape it. I suppose she was right. My hands may be older, but they still know their way around every tool here. I've always worked alone, though the sign above the door, Cole & Son Custom Woodworks, has a blank space where & Son could one day be carved. It's been waiting there for years, patient like me. Dylan used to talk about joining me when he was young, sanding scrap boards beside me, asking endless questions about dovetail joints and grain direction. Back then, I saw a spark in him, a curiosity I thought would someday become craft, but time has a way of dulling bright things. When Laura died, Dylan was in college. I sold off our second truck and took overnight jobs fixing cabins up near Sedona just to pay his tuition. Never told him how close I came to losing the shop some winters. A father's job, I figured, was to make sure his kid never saw the cracks in the walls you patched at midnight. I even gave him a credit card, just for emergencies. He was 20 then, responsible, polite, grateful. I never canceled it, just kept paying it off quietly. Now Dylan's 33 and back under my roof. For a little while, as he puts it. He says the city was too much, that freelance work dried up. I don't pry. He stays in his old room, the one with the faded posters and the window that creaks in the wind. I've tried to see it as a blessing, having my boy home again. Maybe it's God's way of giving me a second chance to rebuild what's drifted between us. He talks big these days about online marketing, branding, turning my work into a modern story. He's full of new terms I don't pretend to understand, and he says them fast like someone afraid silence might prove him wrong. I nod mostly. We could do custom reels, he told me last week. You know, make your brand more viral. I just smiled. Son, the only thing viral I know is the flu. He laughed, but his eyes slid away quick. The shop, though, it keeps me steady. The rhythm of planing boards, the whir of the lathe, the smell of fresh-cut oak, it's the only language that hasn't changed. Each morning I sketch out orders from the local furniture store, build cabinets for folks I've known half my life. They still pay in cash sometimes, still trust a handshake more than a contract. It's an old way of doing things, and maybe it's fading, but it's mine. Neighbors stop by now and then, Pastor Mills from the church or old Marlene from next door who swears my cornbread's better than hers. Folks around here know me as dependable, quiet, a man who minds his word and his work. Respect's a kind of currency in a small town. You earn it nail by nail. At night, when the air turns cold and the sky clears to a field of stars, I sit by the shop window with a ledger in hand. The numbers don't sing the way they used to. Orders have slowed, materials cost more, and my savings aren't what they were. Still, I tell myself it'll be fine. Dylan will help me find new clients. Maybe together we'll carve that missing and son. I glance at the credit card tucked in my wallet. Same one with both our names. It's become more of a habit than a tool, but it stays there, a quiet symbol of trust. I've never checked what he spends on it lately. Maybe I should, but that feels like spying, and I was raised to believe a man's word is his bond. Tonight, after closing the shop, I hold the unfinished sign one more time. The wood feels smooth, ready for letters that haven't yet been carved. I picture it hanging in the morning light, both our names shining together. A foolish thing, maybe, but it keeps me warm in a world that's gotten colder. I place the sign back on its shelf and switch off the lights. The machines hum their last echoes, the air settles into silence. Outside, the pine trees sway gently and the moonlight spills across the gravel path leading to the house. Dylan's car is in the driveway, headlights off. He must have gotten home late. Through the kitchen window, I see his silhouette moving, phone pressed to his ear, talking low. I think about going in to say goodnight, but decide against it. He's grown now. A man needs his space. As I lock the shop door, a small creak in the hinge catches my ear, a reminder that even solid things wear down piece by piece when you stop tending to them. I make a note to fix it tomorrow. Then I walk inside, pour myself one last cup of coffee, and tell myself everything is fine. Chapter 2. The First Hairline. Cracks. A week later, the air in Flagstaff had started to cool, but inside my house, the warmth was slipping away. I came home from the hardware store one afternoon and froze in the doorway. The living room looked nothing like it used to. My old leather sofa was shoved against the wall, the coffee table buried beneath microphones and tangled cables. A bright white ring light threw harsh shadows across Laura's framed photos. My son stood in the middle of it all, talking into a camera. "Yeah, man," he said, laughing into his phone. "The old man still doesn't get ROI or content engagement." He didn't even notice me standing there. For a moment, I couldn't decide what stung more, the words or how easily they came out of his mouth. The home Laura and I built, the one filled with quiet dinners and creaky floorboards, now looked like a set for a show I'd never agreed to be in. When Dylan hung up, I cleared my throat. "You're turning this place into a studio now?" He spun around with that familiar half-smile. "Just for a few shoots, Dad." People love authenticity. Old wood textures, natural light. It's gold for the algorithm. I didn't understand half of it, but I knew enough to feel my stomach tighten. Still, I didn't argue. "Just don't move your mother's pictures again," I said quietly. He nodded without looking at me, already adjusting his camera settings. That evening, while I was sanding a cabinet door, Dylan burst in, phone in hand, laughing. "Dad, stand still, this'll be great." Before I could ask what he meant, I felt a cold powder scatter across my shoulders. Flour. He was filming. "Come on," he grinned. "Light-hearted prank." People love this kind of stuff. I stared at him. "Turn that off." My voice was low, steady. He frowned, lowering the phone but not apologizing. "It's harmless, Dad." "You gotta lighten up. You'll get more followers if you stop acting like the world's ending every time someone jokes. I brushed the flour off my shirt and went back to work. Silence filled the room, heavy as sawdust. That night, when I opened my wallet to check the shop receipts, a bank envelope slipped out. Inside was my monthly statement. My eyes caught on a few new charges: camera equipment, a one-day luxury car rental in Sedona, a fancy dinner at some place I'd never heard of, all under the same credit card we shared. I rubbed my thumb over the numbers. Maybe he'd told me and I forgot. Maybe it was part of some content thing. I tried to believe it was nothing. He came in later talking about expanding reach, about a possible sponsorship. His eyes were bright, restless. I wanted to share his excitement, but all I could think about was that empty line on the sign, "and son." The space felt wider now, like a promise carved into air. Days passed, and little by little, the house didn't feel like mine. Dylan moved his lights into the kitchen, calling it the backdrop. He'd complained that my cooking smells ruined the audio, that the hum from my saw messed up his takes. Once he asked if I could pause the hammering for a few hours because sound design matters. "I've got a deadline, son," I told him. "Mrs. O'Connell's dining table needs to be done before Sunday." He sighed, as if my work were an inconvenience. "You could just move your tools into the garage for a while." "The lighting here's perfect for filming. My tools, my house." I bit back the words burning on my tongue. "This setup's worked fine for 30 years, I said instead. He shrugged, not hearing me at all. Two of my neighbors dropped by that afternoon, Mr. Thompson needing a chair leg fixed, and Marlene reminding me about the church fundraiser bench. Dylan paused his recording just long enough to roll his eyes. "Dad, maybe skip those side gigs for a bit. It's distracting." "Distracting from what?" I asked. "From what I'm trying to build here." I nodded, though the words sat in my gut like a stone. After they left, I swept the floor and listened to the faint clicking of Dylan's camera starting up again. That night, after the lights were off, I sat at the kitchen table with my ledger open. I stared at the balance, thinner than it used to be. Between materials and rising bills, there wasn't much cushion left. Still, I told myself it was temporary. Dylan was chasing something new, something I didn't understand. Maybe I just needed to trust him like I used to. I opened my wallet again. The card was there, edges worn smooth from years of use. It wasn't about money, not really. It was about faith, the same faith that built this home and held us together after Laura died. I decided to wait one more billing cycle before asking questions. Maybe next month the charges would even out. Before bed, I noticed a new sheet taped to the fridge, a calendar with colored boxes. Across the top, in bold marker, it read, "Minimalism Challenge, 48 hours." Underneath, 2 words jumped out: "Full House Control." Below that, he'd written "Sound Lockdown, Shooting Days," and a note: "Dad, no shop noise until Sunday night." I stared at it for a long moment, then at the stack of unfinished orders on my desk. The names of clients, people who trusted me, blurred together. From down the hall came Dylan's muffled laugh, the glow of his screen lighting up the wall. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark, listening. The house that once rang with Laura's humming now throbbed with his videos, his plans, his voice. For the first time in years, I felt like a guest in my own home. A week can change the sound of a house. What used to be the hum of my tools and the low buzz of a radio has turned into clicking shutters, camera beeps, and voices from a screen. It started small, just Dylan filming product shots for engagement. But lately it feels like he's trying to replace the walls themselves with his content. One afternoon, I came home from the hardware store and almost dropped the bag of screws I was carrying. My living room, Laura's living room, had vanished under a pile of cords and tripods. A ring light stood like an alien sun, throwing a sharp glow on the framed photo of our wedding day. The sofa was pushed against the wall, our rug rolled up in the corner. Dylan was on the phone laughing. Yeah, man, I'm setting up the set now. The old man's got that rustic look. Perfect aesthetic for relatability, he said, pacing across the floor. I stayed silent, just watching him walk through my home like a stranger. He ended the call when he finally noticed me. Dad, check this out, he said proudly, waving at the chaos. I'm building a content hub. The light here is insane, supernatural. Looks like you're moving in permanently, I replied, setting the bag down on the table that was now covered with microphones. Don't be dramatic, he said, half laughing. It's just business. I didn't answer. He meant no harm, I told myself. But when I saw Laura's photo leaning crooked behind the light stand, something in my chest tightened. The next day, I was in the shop sanding a table leg when Dylan walked in holding his phone. Hey, Dad, don't move, he said with a grin. Before I could ask why, a puff of white covered my shoulders. Flour. He was filming. Smile. It's a prank. Chill, he said between laughs. I stood there breathing through my nose. Turn that off, Key, I said quietly. Come on, people love this stuff, he argued. You gotta play along. Makes it real. I'm not your audience, son, I said, brushing the flour off. He rolled his eyes, muttering something about boomer energy, and left the room still filming himself. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the day's mail. My credit card statement sat on top. Normally, I skim it, pay the bill, and move on. But something made me look closer this time. A line of new charges caught my eye. Sedona Luxury Car Rentals, Studio Reservation Phoenix, Content Boost Ad Services. My first thought was that there'd been a mistake. The second was worse, that there hadn't. Dylan still had the authorized user card from years ago. I remembered telling him it was for emergencies when he was in college. Somehow that promise had stretched into infinity. I told myself not to overreact. He's trying to build something, I thought. Maybe this is an investment. I closed the envelope and set it aside. The truth could wait another month. Over the next few days, the boundaries blurred even more. Dylan started calling the house the set. He labeled rooms like production zones, the kitchen scene, the hallway take. He started asking me to keep the stove off before his shoots. Said cooking smells threw off the vibe. He told me once, half joking, we could brand you as the silent craftsman. You'd be great online, authentic, raw. I laughed politely but didn't answer. One afternoon, Pastor Mills stopped by to drop off a chair with a broken spindle. He was barely through the door before Dylan asked if he could use his hands for a shot. The pastor smiled awkwardly, said he'd pass. Later, Marlene from next door came to ask about the church fundraiser bench. Dylan sighed, muttering about how these small-town distractions slowed production. After they left, I looked at him. These people are my clients. They're our neighbors. He didn't look up from his phone. Yeah, but they're not our future. The sentence hung there like a splinter. That evening, I walked the perimeter of my property, the smell of fresh-cut pine drifting from the shop. I needed quiet just for a few minutes. From the open window, I heard Dylan laughing again, talking to someone about launch week and exclusive access. His voice was full of energy I didn't recognize. Inside, the kitchen was brighter than usual. A whiteboard leaned against the fridge, covered in blue marker lines. Content schedule. Under that, a calendar filled the page. Across the weekend dates, big bold letters read, Minimalism Challenge, 48 hours. And below that, in smaller text, Full House Control. Sound lockdown. Dad's shop silent. I stood there reading the words again and again. My shop, my home. 2 days of silence, as if I didn't exist. Dylan came in, earbuds hanging from his neck. Oh, hey, you saw the schedule? He said casually. Just for a couple days. I need the whole space. Continuity's key. Continuity, I repeated. You mean you need me out of the way? He hesitated, then smiled like it was a joke. Don't take it personal, Dad. It's just content. I nodded. though every muscle in me wanted to say more. Content, I repeated softly. After he went to his room, I sat down with my ledger. The numbers blurred together under the kitchen light. I added up costs, materials, orders due. The math didn't work like it used to. Maybe it never did. I looked again at that blank sign leaning against the wall. Cole & Son still missing its second name. I imagined carving it tomorrow, finally finishing what I'd started years ago. But something inside whispered not yet, not while the house echoed with someone else's voice. When I turned off the lights, the glow from Dylan's room spilled faintly into the hallway, blue and restless. I paused by his door, listening to him rehearse lines into a camera, his laughter overlapping with the hum of my old refrigerator. I thought of Laura then, how she used to hum the same tune every night before bed, soft and certain. The house felt heavier without that sound. Just content, I murmured to no one. And for the first time since she passed, I locked my bedroom door. Saturday morning arrived too still for comfort. The air outside smelled like pine and dust, but inside my house had the hollow quiet of a recording studio. Dylan's minimalism challenge had officially begun, and with it, I'd been told, half politely, half firmly, to keep my tools silent for 48 hours. "It's just 2 days, Dad," he'd said, handing me a printed schedule like a landlord giving notice. Now I sat in my shop, the machines unplugged, their cords coiled like snakes asleep. Even the dust seemed suspended midair, the quiet pressed on my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. I reached for a chisel out of habit, then stopped. The rule was no noise, no hammering, no sanding. "Sound lockdown," the calendar had said. The phrase felt ridiculous and humiliating. From the living room came the echo of Dylan's voice, bright and artificial. "Welcome back, guys. Today we're embracing stillness, decluttering not just space, but mind." Each syllable carried through the air vents, landing in my shop like static. I tried to read, then to write down project notes, but the stillness mocked me. The shop wasn't built for silence. It was meant for rhythm, metal striking wood, sawdust falling in slow flurries. I picked up a block plane and ran it gently over a scrap of pine, barely whispering against the grain. Then came his footsteps. "Dad!" Dylan appeared in the doorway, camera rolling. "You're throwing off the ambient tone." I looked up, calm but tired. It's hand planing, not a chainsaw. He huffed. "You promised." I told the audience this weekend would be zero noise. You're breaking continuity. Continuity? I set the tool down. I built the shop with my hands, son. I don't need a schedule to use it. Dylan lowered the camera, exasperated. You don't get it. This isn't about you anymore. It's content. There are sponsors watching. I let the words hang there, sharp as nails. I see. So I'm just background noise now. He hesitated, guilt flickering behind his eyes. You're taking it too personally. Hard not to when you're living in my house and dictating when I can work. He sighed, muttered something about old habits, and turned back toward his lights. The door closed behind him, leaving the faint smell of camera batteries and resentment. That evening, I sat at my desk with my ledger open, trying to steady my thoughts by counting. Numbers usually made sense, even when people didn't. But when I logged into my account, the new charges told a different story, one I could no longer ignore. There it was, Phoenix Marriott downtown, $982. Another entry, Influencer Summit registration, $450. The total burned in my eyes. I scrolled further. Equipment rentals, ad subscriptions, a cash transfer I hadn't authorized. My name, my card, his ambition. I leaned back, the chair creaking under the weight of it all. Maybe I'd failed to teach him the value of limits, or maybe he'd learned too well that I'd always clean up the mess. I thought about Laura, how she used to keep the household ledgers in perfect order, every penny accounted for. Small debts grow in silence, she'd say. Speak before they multiply. I closed the laptop and stared at the dark window, my reflection faint against the pine trees. Speaking felt dangerous. It might push him farther away. But silence had its own cost, one I was starting to feel in my bones. I walked back to the shop needing something solid to hold. The air smelled faintly of linseed oil. On the bench lay a half-finished chair I'd been building for Marlene. I reached to move it, but my hand slipped. The leg hit the floor, splintering cleanly down the center. The crack echoed through the room like a gunshot. For a moment, I just stared. The sound seemed to slice through more than wood. My patience, my trust, whatever had held this place together, felt like it had split too. That night, the house buzzed faintly with Dylan's laughter. I tried not to listen, but curiosity is a stubborn thing. I opened my laptop again and found his latest video already trending. The title read, "Boomer Dad versus Modern Hustle." Guess who wins? My stomach turned as I watched the clip. It was the scene from earlier, the confrontation in the shop. He'd cut it cleverly, my face caught mid-sentence, looking stern, while he smiled like the calm professional dealing with a difficult elder. The comments poured in. "Dude, your dad's intense. Classic old-school mindset, bro. Love the generational contrast." Each line felt like a nail driven deeper. I closed the laptop slowly, forcing my breath steady. I wasn't angry, at least not in the loud way. It was a quieter fury, the kind that settles deep and waits. Around midnight, I walked to the workshop again. The moonlight slid across the floorboards, touching the broken chair leg. I bent to pick it up, tracing the split grain with my thumb. I could mend it tomorrow, maybe with glue and clamps. Wood forgives when treated right. People, not so much. For a long time, I stood there staring at the unfinished and sun sign leaning against the wall. I'd once imagined the two of us carving the second line together, a passing of craft from one generation to the next. Now, the empty space below my name looked less like potential and more like loss. Somewhere inside, a part of me whispered that this was only the beginning, that something in our story had already shifted beyond repair. When I finally turned off the lights, I felt the house exhale, long and tired. Tomorrow, I decided I would put things right, not with shouting, not with another argument, but with action. The kind that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Chapter 4. The Failed Reconciliation. The morning light came in soft through the kitchen window, turning the countertop gold. I'd been up since 5, brewing coffee, frying bacon, waiting for the sound of Dylan's door to open. The plan was simple. Talk like men, no shouting, no guilt. I'd printed out the credit card statement and the comments from his video. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned the way it used to before funerals. When he finally walked in, hair messy, phone glued to his palm, I poured him a cup and gestured to the table. "Sit down, son. We need to talk." He sighed. "Dad, if this is about the flower prank—" "It's not," I said, sliding the papers toward him. "It's about this." He looked at the printouts, smirking when he saw the comments. "You read them? Not bad, right? We hit 50,000 views overnight. That's traction." "I'm not talking about views," I said. "I'm talking about the people behind them. My client saw this. Pastor Mills called me this morning to say he'd pray for us. And this," I tapped the statement, "you spent nearly $1,500 in Phoenix, a hotel, a creator summit, and something called a lifestyle launch. You care to explain that?" He set the papers down, expression cooling. "Dad, you're focusing on the wrong metrics." "You always do. You think small, jobs, tables, chairs. I'm building something bigger. Bigger with my name, my shop, my money." "It's our name," he shot back. "You should be proud. People are finally seeing us." "I see what they're seeing," I said quietly. "A son who mocks his father to strangers for likes." His jaw tightened. "It's not mocking. It's storytelling. It's connection." I wanted to believe that, but the silence between us said otherwise. I picked up my mug, the coffee cold now. "Dylan, I may not understand your world, but I know respect when I don't feel it. You're using this family like it's a prop." He crossed his arms. "Maybe that's because you've never let me be part of it. The shop's always been your world, not ours." I paused, surprised by the bitterness in his tone. "I built that shop for both of us." "Then why's it always your name on the sign?" he snapped. I didn't have an answer. The truth was I'd waited for him to come home ready to work beside me, not film me. Maybe that waiting had curdled into something he mistook for control. Before I could say more, my phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Mrs. O'Connell. "So sorry, Ethan. After seeing the video, we'll have to cancel the dining set order. It's not a good look for our brand." Brand. The word made my chest tighten. I turned the screen toward him. "You're costing me work now. People think I'm part of your circus." He frowned, but his tone stayed flat. "You're overreacting. This is how attention works. Some hate, some love. It all converts. Into what? Debt? Shame?" He didn't answer. Instead, he smiled faintly, like he was humoring a confused relative. "You'll see. It's all moving in the right direction." When he left the table, I sat staring at the empty chair, the smell of burnt bacon lingering in the air. I told myself to let it go, but the ache wouldn't quiet. Later that afternoon, while sorting invoices, an email alert popped up on my laptop. The subject line read, "Thank you, Cole Media, LLC. Great presentation." I frowned and opened it. Inside was a corporate message from a consulting firm in Phoenix thanking us for pitching the authentic woodworking lifestyle brand. Attached was a PDF of Dylan's presentation deck. I scrolled through it in disbelief. Photos of my shop, every angle, every piece, filled the slides. My logo sat in the corner, rebranded as Cole Media. The words "Founder, Retired" appeared under my name, followed by CEO Dylan Cole. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. My throat burned, my pulse hammered in my ears. When Dylan came home humming, I met him at the door with the laptop open. "You want to explain this?" He looked, winced, then tried to laugh it off. "Oh, it's just a demo. Mock pitch. No big deal." "No big deal," I said, voice low but shaking. "You sold my name. My work, without asking." "It's not selling. It's scaling. Investors want authenticity, and you're sitting on a gold mine. I'm just packaging it." "Packaging me," I said. His eyes flashed. "You're impossible. You'd rather die with your tools than let anyone help you. And you'd rather sell your family than earn something honest." That landed like a strike. His face hardened. "You think I'm stealing? You've hoarded everything, money, pride, control. I'm just trying to make something of myself." "You're trying to make something off me," I said, slamming the laptop shut. "That's not ambition. That's betrayal." We stood in silence. The only sound was the wind outside pushing against the window pane. Then, as if punctuating the moment, something clattered behind us. The unfinished "and Son" sign, hanging by a single hook, fell and split clean down the center. Neither of us moved to pick it up. I stepped back, suddenly tired. "Get out of my shop." He stared at me for a long second, jaw tight, eyes bright with something that looked like hurt or pride. Then he turned and walked away. For a long while I stayed standing in that room, staring at the broken sign on the floor. The dust shimmered in the slanted light, and I thought about how even the strongest wood can split when the grain runs in opposite directions. As dusk fell, I grabbed my coat and walked to the churchyard. The oak tree there cast long shadows over the grass. Beneath it, a small stone marker bore Laura's name. I sat down, elbows on my knees. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," I whispered. "He's yours as much as mine. Tell me how to reach him." The wind rustled the branches but gave no answer. When I came home, the driveway was empty. The lights were off. On the kitchen table lay the shared credit card, snapped clean in half. Next to it, A note written in Dylan's hurried scrawl. "Don't worry, I'll make it big enough for both of us." I stood there for a long time, the note trembling in my hand. For the first time in years, the house felt like a stranger's, and I realized with a cold certainty that my son hadn't just left. He'd taken something of me I couldn't rebuild. If you're still with me and you think the worst is over, hold on tight, because the real blow isn't physical, it's emotional, and it's coming fast. The storm rolled in without warning, a low growl of thunder pressing against the horizon as I pulled into the driveway. The air smelled like rain and metal. When I stepped out of the truck, something white caught my eye, an envelope wedged beneath the door. It bore the state seal and the words, "Notice of Ownership Transfer." My gut clenched. I tore it open right there on the porch. The letter inside was short, official, and devastating. "This is to confirm the registration and transfer of Cole and Son Custom Woodworks to Cole Media LLC. Dylan's name was listed as the managing member. Mine wasn't there at all. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The rain started falling, cold needles against my skin. I read the line again and again, hoping it would rearrange itself into something else. But the truth stayed fixed on the page. My son had stolen my livelihood. I grabbed my keys and drove toward the shop. The windshield wipers beat a desperate rhythm faster than my thoughts. By the time I turned onto Main Street, the sign outside my building was half lit. Cole Media Workshop. The "and" son was gone. My hands shook as I got out of the truck. Through the front window I could see lights, movement, and cardboard boxes marked "Content Studio Setup." A ring light glowed in the corner. I saw Dylan, hair-styled, wearing a crisp denim jacket, talking to a camera. I pounded on the glass. He turned, startled, then forced a grin. I could see him mouth, "Keep rolling." That was all it took. I yanked the door handle, locked. Rage blurred my sight. I found the spare key in the planter and shoved it in. The door flew open with a metallic crack. "Dad," he said, his voice tight, but still performative, "you're just in time for the grand reveal." "What the hell is this?" I shouted over the rain hammering the roof. "You changed the name? You filed papers?" He gestured to the camera with a salesman's smile. "Folks, this is my dad, the original craftsman behind our new creative space, Cole Media Workshop. We're bringing traditional craftsmanship into the digital era." "Turn that damn thing off," I barked, stepping forward. He didn't. The chat on his screen exploded with comments, laughing emojis, fire icons, phrases like family drama IRL and scripted or real. "Dylan," I said, lowering my voice, "you used my business registration, my insurance, my name. That's fraud." He sighed theatrically, glancing toward the camera again. "No, Dad, it's evolution. You can't cling to the past forever." "Evolution?" I held up the letter, soaked now from the rain that had followed me inside. "You stole from me." He smirked. "It's not theft if it's family." Something in me snapped. I stepped forward, grabbed the tripod, and knocked the camera off balance. The screen went sideways but stayed live. Viewers watched the chaos unfold, the yelling, the scramble. "Stop!" he shouted, lunging to grab the camera. "End it!" I barked back. He shoved my arm away, hard. I stumbled, hit the edge of the workbench, and pain shot through my leg like lightning. The sound that came out of me was more animal than human, a sharp, guttural cry. The world blurred. I fell, clutching my shin. A white-hot surge of agony exploded through me. I heard the snap before I registered the break. My leg, broken clean. The chat kept streaming. Comments scrolled faster than I could blink. "Holy hell, did he just hit his dad? This can't be real. Call 911. Dylan froze, his face pale under the harsh LED light. For a split second, I saw the boy he used to be, frightened, remorseful, but the mask came back fast. He leaned over the camera, voice shaking but smooth. "It's fine, everyone. Just a misunderstanding. We'll be back after the break." He ended the stream and turned to me. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "Get away from me," I hissed through the pain. He hesitated, torn between guilt and self-preservation. Then, without another word, he grabbed the camera, stuffed it into a bag, and ran into the rain. I was alone, lying on the cold floor. The Anson shingle that used to hang above the counter lay shattered beside me, one half under my hand. The wood grain split right through the ampersand, as if even the word and had given up trying to connect us. Minutes blurred, the rain outside turned to thunder. I dragged myself toward my phone, each movement a stab of agony. My call log blurred with tears before I finally reached 911. At the hospital, the morphine dulled the pain but not the memory. The doctor said it was a clean break, bad but mendable. I lay there staring at the fluorescent ceiling, the smell of antiseptic filling the air. A nurse came in, soft-spoken, asking if someone should be called. I shook my head. No one left to call. Hours passed before the door opened again. A woman stepped in, dark hair, glasses, a folder in her hands. "Mr. Cole?" she asked gently. "My name's Rachel Meyer." "I'm an attorney. I saw the video before it was taken down." I blinked. "You saw it?" She nodded. "Half the state did." "But here's the thing, what your son did isn't just online drama. It's illegal. He changed business registration and insurance records. We can prove fraud, embezzlement, maybe even elder abuse." Her words settled over me like the first crack of dawn after a long night. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something different from pain. It was clarity. She handed me her card. "If you want justice, I can help you. No fee. Consider it a moral case." I looked at the card, then at my bandaged leg, and finally at the window where the storm had begun to fade. For 50 years, I'd believed justice was something you left to God or time. But now I understood. Sometimes you have to build it yourself with your own two hands, even if one of them is shaking. If you're still watching and wondering whether justice or forgiveness will win, tell me below, because what happens next will test both to their breaking point. Chapter 6. The Choice. The days after the hospital blurred together, mornings measured by pain medication, nights by the sound of the old wall clock ticking in the dark. My leg sat in a cast, heavy as guilt. The house was too quiet, and every shadow looked like memory. I spent most of my time in the recliner near the window, watching the autumn leaves gather in piles I couldn't sweep anymore. I told myself not to look online, but temptation is a cruel thing. One afternoon, I opened my phone and searched my own name. The video, our fight, had been uploaded again. Someone had edited it into a montage set to dramatic music, the title flashing in bold red letters, "Father versus Son, when tradition meets toxicity." There were reaction videos, memes, even merchandise, T-shirts that said, "Respect the grind," with Dylan's face printed across the front. Comment sections were full of strangers debating our lives as if we were characters in a show. Some called me abusive. Others said I deserved what happened. Only a few understood the quiet heartbreak behind it all. I tossed the phone aside and closed my eyes. I had spent decades trying to live a simple, decent life. Now the world knew me as a headline. That evening, Rachel Meyer came by again carrying a manila folder. "How's the leg?" she asked gently. "Still attached," I said. "That's something." She sat across from me, setting the folder on the table. "I wish I were here with good news, Ethan, but things have escalated." I gave a tired smile. "Of course they have." She opened the folder, revealing screenshots, contracts, and photos. "Your son's using the footage to promote his new brand. He's calling it Legacy Rebuilt. He's partnered with a marketing firm out of Los Angeles. They're selling NFTs of your workshop images, offering interviews, merch. He's turned the story into a redemption arc with him as the victim." For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking clock. He's making money off breaking his father's leg? Rachel hesitated. Yes, and quite a bit. They're framing you as a symbol of outdated masculinity. He's doing podcasts, video panels, selling a narrative about overcoming emotional abuse. A bitter laugh escaped me. He used to cry when I took his phone away for dinner. Rachel leaned forward. Ethan, I know this hurts, but you need to understand. He's not just telling a story. He's monetizing it. If we don't act, he'll own every trace of your name online. Every photo, every design. He's already filed trademark applications for Cole Media in multiple states. I stared at the papers. The words swam on the page, black letters against the white light of betrayal. He really wants to erase me. Not erase, she said softly. Replace. Her honesty stung, but I needed it. For the next few minutes, she explained the legal steps: fraud, intellectual property, defamation. It sounded like war fought with paperwork instead of weapons. I listened, numb. When she finished, she said, I can file everything. We can freeze his accounts, block the trademarks, maybe even reclaim your business. But you have to sign, and once you do, there's no taking it back. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the window. The street was empty. The oak leaves drifted across the pavement, gathering at the curb like forgotten things. Rachel, I said quietly, you have kids? She nodded. 2. Teenagers. Why? I swallowed hard. Then you know. How hard it is to see them fall and not reach out. Her voice softened. You've reached out, Ethan. He's the one who pushed away. That night, after she left, I stayed in the dark thinking. I thought about Dylan as a boy, how he'd sit beside me at the workbench, feet swinging, asking questions about everything. Why does sawdust smell sweet? Why do nails bend when you hit them wrong? Why does Mom like quiet songs? Those were the days I thought love was enough to keep a family together. Now, every sound of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, felt like ghosts answering back. The next morning, I made coffee, balanced on my crutches, and sat with the folder again. I turned on the TV for background noise. That's when I saw it. Dylan's face on a morning talk show. The headline read, The Son Who Fought His Father's Legacy. He was smiling, confident, wearing a tailored jacket. The host laughed at his jokes. So this all started with a small family dispute? She asked. He chuckled. Yeah, you could say that. I just wanted to modernize my dad's business. Sometimes old habits die hard. They played clips from our fight. The shove, the fall, the broken sign. The audience gasped. Dylan shook his head dramatically. It wasn't supposed to go that way. But pain has a way of pushing you toward growth. Then the trailer rolled. Legacy Burned, a documentary by Dylan Cole. It showed our old home videos spliced with dark filters and music. My voice, edited, said things I never said. You'll never be enough. Without me, you're nothing. The audience applauded. Something inside me went cold. By the time Rachel returned that afternoon, the papers were already on the table. She looked at me silently as I picked up the pen. You're sure? She asked. I nodded. If he wants to build fame off my name, I said, signing the line with a steady hand, then he'll have to spell it right, in court. Rachel nodded, collecting the documents. This won't be easy, Ethan. He'll fight back. Publicly. I know, I said, but I'm done being the villain in his story. When she left, the sky outside had turned gray again. Rain tapped softly against the window pane, washing away the dust that had settled there for weeks. I wheeled myself toward the old workshop, where the broken half of the "In Sun" sign lay on the table. I ran my fingers along the jagged edge. The wood was rough but real, something honest, unlike everything else that had come from him lately. I picked up a piece of sandpaper and began smoothing the splinters, not to fix it, just to let it rest easy in my hands. As the rain fell harder, the sound of sanding mixed with it, rhythmic, quiet, patient. I wasn't building revenge, I was reclaiming peace. For the first time since that night, I felt the faintest sense of control return, not over Dylan, but over myself. The knock at the door came just after sunrise, 3 short raps that echoed through the quiet house. I eased myself up, leaning on the cane the hospital had issued me, and opened it to find a courier standing in the cold. He held out a thick envelope. "Mr. Cole?" I nodded. "Delivery from the county courthouse." I took it, thanked him, and closed the door. For a long moment I just stood there, staring at the seal on the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, like the weight of every decision I'd made since that night. I tore it open. Inside were the stamped documents. Cole versus Cole. Media LLC official. Irrevocable. The lawsuit had begun. My hands trembled, but not from regret. For once, it wasn't guilt I felt. It was resolve. Quiet, cold, necessary. The internet found out before the day ended. By afternoon, my name was back on the trending list. Some headlines were cruel. Father sues son over fame. Others defended me, the man who fought for his name. The comment sections were a war zone. I tried not to read them, but people sent links anyway. Strangers analyzed our story like it was a morality play. "He's teaching his son accountability," one woman wrote. Another said, "No father should destroy his child over money." Money. I almost laughed at that. This was never about money. It was about truth, the kind that didn't need cameras to prove itself. For weeks I stayed home, recovering, walking slowly from room to room, like an old ghost retracing familiar ground. The house had changed since the day Dylan left. It wasn't empty, it was honest. I started noticing small things again, the smell of cedar from the woodpile, the creak of the porch when the wind picked up, the way the morning light fell on Laura's framed photograph by the mantel. Then one day, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. "Mr. Cole, you don't know me, but I apprenticed under you for 2 summers back when Dylan and I were both in high school. You taught me how to plane a board straight, but more than that, you taught me that honesty is worth more than approval. I watched what happened online, and I just wanted to say, thank you for not backing down." I read that letter 3 times before setting it aside. It didn't erase the pain, but it carved out a small space for pride. Over the following weeks, other letters came, one from an old client, another from a neighbor, a few from strangers who'd read about the case. They didn't all agree with me, but they respected me. It had been a long time since I'd felt that. Rachel kept me updated on the case. Her voice was steady, confident. "We've got traction," she said one morning. "A few of Dylan's sponsors are pulling back. Journalists are asking questions about his version of events." I didn't respond right away. "So it's starting to crumble," I finally said. She hesitated. "Yes, but I need you to understand. He's going to fall hard, Ethan, and it won't be pretty." "I know," I said, "but I warned him once. Everything fake eventually breaks." The following week, headlines began to shift tone. Cole Media accused of exploiting workers. Former collaborators speak out. Influencers' viral story built on lies. The empire Dylan had built on pixels and sympathy was cracking. His face looked different in the new interviews, paler, thinner, his confidence dimmed. I saw a clip of him once, refusing to answer a question about the lawsuit. He looked tired, lost. I didn't feel joy, just a quiet sorrow that pressed behind my ribs. I'd raised him to build things that lasted. Instead, he'd built a tower of cards and climbed to the top, only to feel the wind shift. That evening, I took my cane and drove to the workshop. The court had granted me temporary control of the property while the case played out. The building stood silent, the windows dusty but familiar. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first: wood shavings, oil, dust, memory. My workbench sat just where I had left it, a thin layer of sawdust frosting its surface. I ran my fingers along the edge, tracing years of wear. The and son sign, now smooth and sanded, rested in the center of the table. I set the court documents beside it, two symbols of what was broken and what was being repaired. The afternoon light came through the slats, turning everything gold. For a brief moment, I imagined Dylan there again, laughing, asking questions, the way he used to before ambition hardened him. That version of him still lived somewhere in my memory, untouched by fame or greed. I whispered to the empty room, "I didn't want to fight you, kid. I just wanted you to be honest." As I locked up and turned to leave, I realized I no longer felt hatred, just exhaustion. Maybe that was what healing really looked like. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but a kind of quiet acceptance that you can't unmake what's been done. That night the phone buzzed. An email notification. I opened it expecting Rachel or a court update, but it wasn't either. The sender's name made my chest tighten. Dylan Cole. The subject line was blank. The message was short. "Was it worth it, Dad?" I stared at the words for a long time, feeling something twist deep inside me. He still didn't understand. Or maybe he did, and the question wasn't about me at all, it was about himself. I started to type a reply, then stopped. I deleted the draft and closed the laptop. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. I whispered into that stillness, not expecting an answer. Ask yourself that. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of pine and snow. Winter was coming, but the storm inside me was finally easing. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. 3 months passed before I realized the nightmares had stopped. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. I woke each morning to the sound of birds instead of the buzzing notifications that used to fill the silence. My legs still ached when the weather turned cold, but I'd learned to move with the stiffness. Some breaks never fully heal, they just teach you new ways to walk. The shop had been returned to me under court order. It stood where it always had, waiting, like an old friend I'd wronged. I spent the first week cleaning it, sweeping sawdust, oiling hinges, letting sunlight in again. The air smelled like cedar and renewal. For the first time in years, I wasn't working to fill orders or meet deadlines. I was building something small, quiet, and entirely my own. That morning, I stood at the workbench shaping a piece of oak. My hands had grown slower but steadier. Each motion felt deliberate, healing. The radio hummed softly in the background, some blues song about lost chances. I caught myself humming along, almost smiling. When the door creaked open, I didn't look up. Only one person ever knocked before stepping in. Rachel's voice carried through the sawdust haze. "You really can't stay away from this place, can you?" I grinned faintly. If I stopped moving, I might start thinking again. Dangerous habit. She laughed, setting down a stack of papers. "Good news first. The court ruled in your favor." Dylan didn't contest the final motion. The business, trademarks, everything, it's officially yours again. I leaned on the workbench, exhaling slowly. "So, it's over." "In the legal sense, yes. In the emotional sense?" She shrugged. "That's your department." I nodded, eyes drifting to the half-finished piece in front of me, a small wooden box, plain but balanced. "I thought I'd feel relief," I said quietly, "but it's more like silence." Rachel smiled softly. "Sometimes silence is the best ending there is." She handed me an envelope. "I also thought you should see this." Inside was a clipped article from an online paper. Cole Media shuts down amid lawsuits and sponsor exodus. Underneath, a smaller headline read, "Founder Dylan Cole steps away from public life." I scanned the text. No bitterness rose this time, only an ache that felt old, worn smooth by time. He really lost it all, didn't he? Rachel hesitated. He might have gained something else. One of my colleagues up north mentioned a Dylan Cole volunteering with a charity that teaches woodworking to veterans. No social media, no press, just working. I looked at her, unsure if I should believe it. You think it's him? She shrugged. Maybe. People find strange ways back to themselves. After she left, I sat in the shop alone. The light shifted through the slats, painting long stripes across the floor. I thought about Dylan, the boy who once held my hammer with both hands, the man who'd turned that same hand into a weapon against me. If he was truly rebuilding somewhere, I didn't need to see it. Maybe forgiveness didn't require reunion. Maybe it was just the absence of hate. That evening, the wind turned cool again. I made a fire in the old brick hearth at the back of the shop, the one Laura used to love when she'd bring me coffee on long nights. The and Son sign sat on the table beside me, smooth now, the cracks sanded down to soft edges. For weeks I'd debated what to do with it. Hang it again, store it away. Each option felt wrong. It wasn't a symbol anymore. It was a scar. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the faded lettering, and whispered, "You did your part." Then I placed it gently into the fire. The flames caught slowly at first, curling around the edges, deepening the carved letters until they glowed. Smoke rose, gray and steady. I watched it lift toward the chimney, carrying years of noise and anger with it. For the first time, I didn't feel loss watching something burn. I felt release. The shop was silent except for the crackle of wood, the smell of smoke mixed with cedar, bittersweet and final. I sat there until only ashes remained, glowing faintly in the embers. Later, when the fire had cooled, I swept the ashes into a small tin and set it on the shelf beside Laura's picture. No words, no ceremony, just a quiet acknowledgement of what once was. The next morning I began sketching again. A new sign, simpler, cleaner. Cole Woodworks. No ampersand, no legacy tethered to it. Just me. The pencil lines came easily, confident. I wasn't rebuilding the past. I was shaping something new, something honest. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp and full of sunlight. The snow had melted, revealing patches of green pushing through the dirt. The street below buzzed with faint life, neighbors walking dogs, kids on bikes, the small-town rhythm returning. As I walked toward the diner for lunch, a few people waved, not out of pity this time, but recognition, respect. It startled me at first, then warmed me in a quiet, unexpected way. Inside the diner, the waitress, Nancy, who'd known me since Laura was alive, poured my coffee and said, "Glad to see you back, Ethan. You look lighter." "Maybe I finally put something down," I said. She smiled. "About time." I watched the sunlight glint off the coffee cup, the ordinary beauty of it. I realized I didn't need closure from Dylan or anyone else. The story didn't need to end neatly, it just needed to keep going honestly this time. When I left the diner, I stopped at the hardware store to pick up new paint for the sign, deep walnut brown, the color of the wood I'd always loved working with. Back at the shop, I stood before the empty space on the front wall where the old sign had hung. I traced the outline of its shadow with my fingers, then smiled. This was where the past ended and the future began, not in fire or fame, but in quiet, steady hands. And when I picked up the brush, the first stroke felt like forgiveness. If you've made it this far and feel that fragile hope flicker back to life, stay with me, because redemption sometimes comes from the last person you'd expect. By late summer, the desert had come alive again. The monsoon rains had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. The hills outside my window shimmered with gold and sage, and every morning I opened the shop doors wide so the warm wind could roll through, carrying the smell of pine and oil. 6 months had passed since the last court hearing. The lawyers had stopped calling, and even Rachel had begun signing her emails with shorter goodbyes. The fight was over. The house, the land, the shop, all officially mine again. But the victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a long, slow exhale after holding my breath for years. I spent my days rebuilding in small ways. Not just fixing wood, but fixing rhythm. I'd rise with the sun, brew coffee strong enough to wake the ghosts, and walk barefoot across the cool concrete floor of the workshop. The radio stayed off now. Silence was my music. I didn't think much about the past anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because it finally didn't rule me. That morning I was working on the last piece of a new sign. Cole Woodworks. Simple letters, dark walnut paint, sanded to a clean matte finish. My hands were steady. My heart was too. On the shelf beside me sat the small tin that held the ashes of the In Sun sign. I hadn't opened it since that night. I kept it there as a reminder, not of loss, but of endurance. The door creaked open and I heard the familiar sound of heels on concrete. Rachel stepped inside, her hair pulled back, sunglasses perched on her head. "You still allergic to vacations?" she asked, smiling. I wiped my hands on a rag. "I'll take one when the work's done." She laughed. "Then I guess I'll see you in 10 years. She handed me a folder, thin this time. Final paperwork, everything's officially closed. Settlements in your account. Dylan never appealed. I looked at the folder, then set it aside without opening it. "Thank you, Rachel, for everything." "You paid me," she said, waving it off. "I mean for staying when you didn't have to." Her expression softened. "You deserved someone to stand up for you, Ethan. That's all." After she left, I stood there for a long moment staring at the folder. Then I tucked it into a drawer and went back to sanding. The world didn't stop for closure. It just moved differently afterward. A few days later, when I came back from the lumberyard, there was an envelope waiting in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, but familiar. My hands froze. I took it inside, sat at the workbench, and stared at it until the afternoon light turned amber. Finally, I opened it. There were only a few lines, written in black ink that had bled in spots like it had been written in a rush or an emotion he couldn't control. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't think I even deserve it, but I wanted you to know. I'm working with a small group up north. We build furniture for veterans. Nothing fancy, just honest work. Every day I think about what you tried to teach me and how I ignored it. I'm learning now. I hope you're still building too." It was signed only with a single letter, D. Inside the envelope was a small photograph. A table. Simple, uneven, the joints rough but sturdy. On the corner, burned into the wood, were the initials DC. I sat there a long time, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't know whether to feel grief or pride. In the end, I just felt still. That night I took the letter outside and sat on the porch. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky orange and soft pink. I read the words again, slower this time, as cicadas sang from the trees. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something you gave once. It was something you practiced. Every time the anger tried to rise again, you met it with quiet instead. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the tin with the ashes of the old sign. The two belonged together, remnants of what was burned and what was reborn. The next morning I woke early. The air was cool, the kind that hinted at autumn coming. I carried the new sign outside and propped it against the front wall of the shop. The paint caught the light, gleaming softly. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the lacquer, older, slower, but peaceful. I drilled in the first screw, then the second. With each twist, something settled inside me. When it was finally in place, I stepped back. Cole Woodworks. No ampersand, no ghosts, just me. I leaned against the doorway, looking at it. The name wasn't about erasing the past, it was about owning the present. The son I'd raised was out there somewhere, maybe shaping wood the way I once taught him to, maybe learning what it means to create instead of destroy. That was enough for me. As the day warmed, I brewed coffee and sat on the porch again. A few customers had started to trickle back in, neighbors needing repairs, friends wanting a table or chair. Word had gotten around that I was taking small commissions again. Business didn't matter, though. What mattered was that my hands still worked and my heart did too. Before locking up that evening, I turned off the lights and looked around the shop one last time. The smell of varnish hung in the air. The new sign gleamed above the door. I whispered almost to myself, "Guess we both found our way." Outside, the sky deepened to indigo. The stars came out one by one, steady and unhurried. I stood there until the last light faded, listening to the hum of cicadas and the far-off sound of wind through the pines. For the first time in a long while, I didn't think about what had been taken from me. I thought about what remained, peace, purpose, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply walking away and letting life rebuild itself. I locked the door, turned toward the open road, and smiled. The mornings were cooler now. Autumn had slipped quietly into the valley, dusting the mesquite trees with gold and filling the air with that faint, smoky scent that always made me think of endings and beginnings. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, the rim chipped from years of use, and watched the first light of day stretch across the horizon. From where I sat, I could see the new sign hanging above the workshop door. Cole Woodworks. Steady, clean, simple. No ampersand. No ghosts. The silence that used to weigh heavy on me now felt lighter, almost sacred. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore. It was the silence of peace. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to prove, when the world outside has stopped spinning faster than your heart can keep up. I'd fought long enough. Now I just wanted to breathe. Inside the shop, sawdust floated in golden shafts of light. I'd started a new project, a rocking chair, the first thing I'd made just for myself in years. Every joint was cut by hand, every curve sanded smooth by hours of quiet focus. The work was slower than it used to be. My legs still ached when I stood too long, but I didn't mind. Every motion had meaning again. People had started coming by more often. Neighbors, old clients, even strangers who'd heard my story. They'd stop in, sometimes to buy a piece, sometimes just to talk. They'd ask about Dylan. I never said much. "He's finding his way," was all I'd offer, and somehow that answer felt enough. The truth was, I didn't know where he was. The last letter had come months ago. I hadn't written back, but I'd kept it close. Some nights I'd take it out of the tin, unfold it, and read it again under the dim light of the workbench lamp. The ink had faded slightly, but the words still carried weight. It wasn't an apology. It was something harder to write than that. A small acknowledgement that he was trying to be better. I'd learned over time that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, it's about releasing its hold. For months, anger had lived in me like a splinter, sharp and invisible. But anger, if you let it, starts to eat through your ribs until there's nothing left but bitterness. I didn't want that. I didn't want to die angry at my own son. One evening, I found myself thinking about Laura, my wife, Dylan's mother. It had been years since she passed, but the memory of her voice was still clear in my mind. She'd had this way of seeing the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. I remember once, after a terrible fight between Dylan and me when he was a teenager, she'd said, "He'll break your heart one day, Ethan, but he'll also remind you why you have one." I didn't understand her then. I do now. That night, I took the finished rocking chair out to the porch. I set it facing west so I could see the sunset. The chair creaked softly under my weight as I settled in, the wood warm from the day. I brought out the tin that held the ashes of the old sign and Dylan's letter. I placed them on the small table beside me, symbols of everything that had burned and everything that had survived. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of cedar and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out low and lonesome. I smiled. There was something comforting about the stillness of the desert, the way it never rushed you, never demanded anything more than your presence. As the sun dipped lower, I thought about legacy. For years, I'd believed it was something you passed down, money, a business, a name carved into a sign, but now, sitting there in that quiet light, I understood it differently. Legacy wasn't about what you left behind. It was about what you built within, in yourself, in others, in the small, unseen acts that ripple through time. I didn't know if Dylan would ever come back. Maybe he'd keep working in that carpentry shop up north. Maybe he'd start over somewhere else, tell people he learned his craft from a man whose name didn't need to be spoken. I was okay with that. Sometimes love meant letting go so far that you couldn't see the return path anymore. Later that week, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. The pages smelled faintly of sawdust. My handwriting was slower now, but steadier. I wrote, "Some things you build to last. Some things you build to let go. Both matter. Both are love." I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf next to the tin. Then I turned off the lights and stepped outside again. The night sky stretched above me, vast, endless, merciful. I leaned back in the rocking chair, letting it move gently beneath me. The world had a rhythm again. My heartbeat matched it. I thought of Dylan, somewhere far away, shaping wood with hands that once clenched in anger. I hoped he'd found peace in the grain the same way I had. "Love doesn't end," I whispered, my voice barely more than breath. "It just changes shape." The wind answered softly, brushing against the porch rail, moving through the trees. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of the desert fill me, the hum of crickets, the sigh of wind, the faint creak of the chair beneath me. I had lost much, yes, but I had gained something quieter, stronger, and far more lasting. The understanding that forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about freeing yourself to live again. As the horizon darkened and stars bloomed overhead, I took one last sip of my coffee and smiled. Tomorrow I'd wake early and open the shop again. There were still things to build, still stories to tell through the wood. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. In the quiet after any storm, what remains tells the truth. Betrayal may break bone and trust, but it can also reveal stronger timber in a life. Boundaries are not punishments. They are the frame that keeps a house standing. Mercy is not weakness. It's choosing peace without pretending wrong never happened. Forgiveness, when it arrives, is less a verdict than a daily craft. Sand the splinters, oil the hinge, let the door swing freely. Legacy is not a name on a sign, but the dignity we practice unseen, the work of our hands outlasting our feelings. In the end, survival is quieter than revenge. Honest labor and a heart that knows when to let go and when to hold. If this journey moved you, thank you for staying. Share your reflections, what moments stayed with you, what you'd have done differently, and where you're watching from. Join this community by subscribing and turning on notifications so you won't miss the next story. Your voice keeps these lessons alive. Your presence means more than you know.